to sports, to our jobs, this scripture can help us. The Bible tells us of many times where courage came into play, both great courage and a lack of courage. First up, we're going to start with the lack of courage. Moses. Moses was a godly fellow in his later days, but he was not always. Turn with me to Exodus 3, 2 through 6. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for this place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. This moment, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now skip down to verse 11. And Moses said to him, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask, What is his name? Then what shall I say to them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. Now go to 4:1. Moses answered, What if they do not believe me or listen to me, and say, The Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, What is that in your hand? A staff, he replied. Throw it on the ground. Moses threw it on the ground and became a snake, and he ran from it. Moses, he had a little bit of courage. He saw the bush, he came to it, and when God said his name, he answered. But he stopped when the expectations became too high on him. He became afraid. He didn't have the courage to stand up to Pharaoh, so he made excuses. We do this too. We start into something, but back out when it is too hard. For example, like, you go to a live activity. You go there, go to do something, but then you have to work. You don't want to work. So you leave. We try to make excuses so that we don't have to talk to someone. Like we say, oh, that person, they don't want to be bothered by me. Oh, I just want to go home. I'm getting sick. That kind of stuff. Now, on to Peter. Turn with me to Matthew 14, 22 through 30.
14, 22 to 22. Matthew 14. 15.
Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to the other side while he dismissed the crowd. After he had dismissed them, he went up alongside a mountain to pray. Later that night, he was there alone. And the boat was already a considerable distance from land, buffeted by the waves because the wind was against it. Shortly before dawn, Jesus went out to them walking on the lake. When the disciples saw him walking on the lake, they were terrified. It is a ghost, they said, and cried out in fear. But immediately Jesus said to them, Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. Lord, if it is you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came toward Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Peter had some courage. He was willing to step out of the boat, which I don't think many of us would be willing to do. But then he was overwhelmed by the wind and the waves. We are this way. We volunteer for something or start something, we think we can do it. But then we become overwhelmed by the work we have to do, so we stop. Then, just like Peter did, we have three choices. We can just give up and that's the worst option. We can try to do it on our own, which is still not very good, or we can call on God and ask for help. And only one of these will 100% of the time help you, and that is to call on God. Now, we have Peter again. Turn with me to Matthew 26, 69 through 75. Now Peter was sitting in the courtyard, and a servant girl came to him. "You are also with Jesus of Galilee," she said. But he denied it before them all. "I do not know what you are talking about," he said. Then he went out to the gateway, where another servant girl saw him, and said to the people there, "This fellow was with Jesus the Nazarene." He denied it again with an oath. "I do not know the man." After a little while, those standing there went up to Peter and said, "Surely you are one of them. Your accent gives you away." Then he began to call down curses, and he swore to them, "I do not know this man." Immediately a rooster crowed. Then Peter remembered the words Jesus had spoken. "Before the rooster crows, you will disown me 3 times." And he went outside and wept bitterly. Peter didn't have the courage to stand up for what he believed in. He was afraid of persecution and frankly wanted to save his own skin. We can relate to this. We are afraid to speak out for fear of persecution. This person could be loss of a reputation, an ousting from a group, or just plain old bullying. Peter did what he did. He lied, so he can guarantee he would live. We lie and don't have the courage to stand up for personal gain or for fear of just verbal abuse. Peter was playing a much more high-stakes game, but we all play the same way. Not standing up for what we believe makes our life a lot easier. Now for the moments of extreme courage. First up, David. Turn with me to 1 Samuel 17, 1 through 9. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Sodo
17, 1 through
Judea.
9.
They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Sodo and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled, camped in the valley of Elah, and drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley in between them. A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits in a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear staff was like a weaver's rod, and his iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer went in front of him. Goliath stood up and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you not come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose one man and have him come down to me. If he is able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I ever come and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Now skip down to 1740. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones in the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand approached the Philistine. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with a shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods, "Come here, and I will give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." David said to the Philistine, "You come at me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come at you with the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." While the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine in the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead and he fell face down on the ground. David had the courage not to just face the giant, but to run at it. He didn't hesitate thinking, oh, I'm not going to do it, and then all of a sudden the Philistine was on him, so he had to fight. He ran. He had the trust in God that it would all work out. We need to be the same way. We need to have the courage to face the giant problems we have. This could be many different things, like planning a whole week of VBS as director, writing a sermon as a preacher, or being the younger brother of the one who said he would preach, but then went out of town. We need to trust in God as well. We need to trust that it will all work out. Like it says in Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose. It will always work out for the good of the kingdom. Whether that is good for you or not, it will always be the benefit of the kingdom. And that is what we work for. Next up, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Turn to Daniel 3:13. Now, most of us know the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, but I'll explain it. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he made this big golden statue. And at the sound of the music, all the subjects had to bow down and worship it. But Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they refused, and then there was a snitch, and they Now 13. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All these men were brought before the king. And Nebuchadnezzar said to them, Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. And then what God can be able to rescue you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hands. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Now we all know the end. He made the furnace 7 times hotter and threw them in, and it killed the guys that threw the 3 in. But when he looked in the furnace, there were 4 of them walking around, and when they were walked out, they didn't smell like smoke, nothing would burn. And the king declared that any people who defy the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be cut into pieces, and their home will be turned to rubble. Now this is a prime example of courage. True courage is making a stand without knowing the outcome. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did this. They knew that God could rescue them, but they didn't know if he would. They had the courage to stand up for what they believed in. They had the courage to not fit in with an entire country of people. And they had the courage to die for what they knew was right. We need to be the same way. We need to have the courage to stand up for what we believe. We need to have the courage to not fit in. For the world is not a place we want to fit in with. It is a dark place. Now, death isn't something we face all the time, but it can still happen all the same. Think of Columbine. We must have the courage to die if we are put in a situation like that. Now, on to Jesus' disciples. Turn with me to Acts 4:18.
It's been 14 minutes.
They called them in again and commanded them not to speak or preach at all in the name of Jesus. Peter and John replied, What is right in God's eyes, to listen to him or to you? You be the judges. As for us, we cannot help but speaking about what we have seen and heard. After further threats, they let them go. They could not decide how to punish them because all the people were praising God for what had happened. So the man who had been miraculously healed was over 40. On their release, Peter and John went back to their own people and reported what the chief priests and elders had said to them. When they heard this, they raised their voices together in prayer to God. Sovereign Lord, they said, you made the heavens and the earth and the sea, and everything in them. You spoke by the Holy Spirit through the mouth of your servant, our father David. Why do nations rage and the people plot in vain? The kings of earth rise up and the rulers band together against the Lord, against his anointed one. Peter and John had the courage not to be quiet, not even when threatened. They kept preaching. We should be the same way. We need to have the courage to talk to 100 people or just one. We were given the greatest gift in history ever. In the manger, and then 33 years later on the cross, and then 3 days after that, on the Sunday morning when he rose from the tomb. No one or thing should ever be able to keep us quiet. As the saying goes, it is better to give than to receive. Now the next example isn't a Bible story, but it shows the same amount of courage. In the 16th century, there was a Protestant reformer in England by the name of Hugh Latimer. He was known as a great preacher of his day, and as a result, he had many opportunities to speak. Once he found out that he was able to preach before the King Henry VIII of England. As he thought about his great responsibility to bring a message before the king, he realized that the message that God laid on his heart was not the message the king would want to hear. As he began his sermon, he said, Latimer, Latimer, do you remember that you are speaking before the high and mighty King Henry VIII, who has the power to command you to be sent to prison, and who can have your head cut off if it please him? Will you not take care to say nothing that will offend his royal ears? He paused and continued, Latimer, Latimer, do you not remember that you are speaking before the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, before him at whose throne Henry VIII will stand, before him to whom one day you will have to give an account yourself. Latimer, Latimer, be faithful to your master and declare all of God's word. Latimer faced a choice. Would he preach what the man wanted to hear, or would he preach what God wanted him to preach? Latimer did take his stand for the truth and preached boldly. Eventually he was martyred by Henry's daughter, Queen Mary. Now this is a great example of courage in a more modern time. He had the courage to stand up for what he believed. He had the courage to speak the truth even when he knew that the result would probably not be good. And he had the courage to die. This is a good example to follow because he had a lot of courage. We need to have this much courage as well. But Jesus is the best example to follow. He had the courage to die a painful death. He had the courage to keep preaching, even though he knew the leaders of the day, their hearts, he knew that they were plotting against him. He still kept preaching. Now, courage is a matter of willingness and not overthinking. And this is an example in all the stories. Moses was willing to walk over the bush, but he overthought. He started making excuses because he didn't want to go to the Pharaoh. Peter was willing to come to Jesus, but he started thinking about the size of the waves and the wind and the fact that it was water he was walking on, and he began to sink. Now Peter was willing to follow Jesus after his capture. Then he started thinking about what would happen if the Sanhedrin caught him, what they would do to him. On the flip side, David was willing to face Goliath. He ran at him and never thought twice. He never thought about the fact that the dude was much bigger than him. He had a bigger sword. David had no armor, but he ran at him. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were willing to die for what they believed, and never thought twice about what would happen when they defied a king. What fire does to human flesh. And that God didn't have to save them. They didn't think about that. They just did what they knew was right. Peter and John were willing to keep preaching and never thought about the punishment that would come upon them. Now, I have a question for all you. Are you willing to go on a mission trip? Do you have the courage to be a VBS director, a preacher? We need to have courage as Christians, and lots of it. But God does not leave us to gain courage on our own. He gives us the Holy Spirit. Now gain courage to walk up here, get in that baptistry, claim the Holy Spirit, as well as the forgiveness of sins. Or if you are already baptized, but have not been a courageous Christian, Come up now to rededicate yourself. Come now as we stand and sing.